All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest mysteries in all of archaeology. We're talking about a place that's completely flipping our understanding of human history on its head. It's 12,000 years old, it's massive, and its name is Göbekli Tepe. So what exactly is the big deal with Göbekli Tepe? Well, to get it, we've got to start with the central puzzle, the thing that's had scientists scratching their heads for decades. Okay, so just look at this. This is it. Perched way up on a mountaintop in Turkey, this is Göbekli Tepe. It's this incredible complex of massive, carved stone pillars all set up in these huge circles. And listen, when I say this place is ancient, I mean it's almost unbelievably ancient. And to really wrap your head around just how mind-blowing this is, you gotta get the numbers. We're talking 12,000 years ago. Think about that. That's more than twice as old as the Great Pyramids of Giza. And this wasn't some tiny little settlement. It was a full-on, monumental construction project. And the craziest part? It was built by people who, for all we knew, were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers. I mean, they hadn't even invented farming. So for decades, the story we told ourselves was pretty simple. This place must have been a purely religious site, right? Kind of like a cathedral on a hill. The idea was that nomadic groups would travel here, do some ceremonies, and then just head back out into the wilderness to hunt and gather. But here's where that whole story starts to fall apart. Think about it. Quarrying these giant stones, dragging them up a mountain, and then standing them up, that would take hundreds of people working together for a long, long time. So the million-dollar question is, how in the world did a society of hunter-gatherers feed a workforce that massive? And for a really long time, nobody had a good answer. It was a total mystery. But then archaeologists started to find the solution, right under their feet. A literal mountain of clues that had been hiding in plain sight the whole time. The first huge breakthrough in the case came down to a single, just staggering number. As they excavated the site, researchers found this many tools used for processing food. We're talking 7,268 of them. And listen, we're not talking about a few flint arrowheads here. No. These were heavy-duty tools. We're talking about big basalt handstones and massive grinding bowls. Literally thousands of them. That is way, way more than you'd ever expect to find at some simple, quiet place for rituals. You know, this discovery was a total game changer. The sheer, almost industrial scale of all this equipment, it just didn't fit the old picture of a few bands of hunters. It screamed that they were processing something on a massive scale. But the question was, what was it? Okay, so to crack this mystery wide open, researchers had to go full-on forensic. They brought in the high-tech toolkits of modern archaeology, hunting for microscopic clues completely invisible to the naked eye. So their first move was to use a technique called use-where analysis. It's really cool. Basically, you put these ancient tools under an incredibly powerful microscope, and you can actually read the story of how they were used just by looking at the tiny microscopic scratches and polished spots on their surface. And this is where it gets really amazing. On the left, you're looking at the wear pattern from a 12,000-year-old tool from the site. And on the right, that's the pattern from a brand new replica that scientists used to grind up some wild grain. Just look at them. They are a perfect match. I mean, identical. This was the first real hard evidence that they were grinding up cereal. But, you know, scientists always want more proof. They needed a smoking gun, and they found it with something called phytolith analysis. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Plants, especially grasses like wheat or barley, suck up silica from the soil, and it forms these tiny, durable, almost fossil-like structures inside them. So when the plant dies and rots away, these little silica skeletons get left behind. And here it is. What you're looking at right now is one of those phytoliths, a microscopic fossil from the husk of a cereal plant, found right there in the dirt at Göbekli Tepe. And the thing is, researchers didn't just find one or two. They found them in absolutely massive amounts. Everywhere. In the soil, and even stuck to the surfaces of the grinding tools themselves. That was it. The case was closed. These people were processing wild cereals on an industrial scale. So with all this incredible evidence, that old picture of a quiet, lonely temple, well, it just started to dissolve. And in its place, a much more lively, dynamic, and frankly, more exciting picture of life at Göbekli Tepe began to emerge. But this is where the story gets another crazy twist. When the archaeologists mapped out exactly where all these thousands of grinding tools were found, a really clear pattern popped out. They weren't in the big monumental stone circles. Nope. They were all clustered in the smaller rectangular buildings and in the open-air work areas surrounding the main enclosures.
What this tells us is that there was this fascinating separation of space at the site. You have the grand circular enclosures. Those were probably the sacred spaces for ritual and ceremony. And then you have the surrounding areas, which were basically bustling open-air kitchens, dedicated to preparing food for a huge crowd.
This reconstruction really helps bring it all to life, doesn't it? So forget the idea of a desolate temple. Instead, picture a buzzing hive of activity. Imagine hundreds of people working together out on these terraces, grinding grain, cooking, making all this food, all while looking out over the incredible monuments they were helping to build. And all of this evidence leads scientists to this really compelling new theory, the work feast. The basic idea is simple but revolutionary. How do you get hundreds of people to come together and do this incredibly hard work? You throw a massive party. You feed them. These huge feasts, fueled by tons of processed grain and whatever game they could hunt, were the social engine, the glue that held this whole massive project together. So, what's the final verdict? Is Göbekli Tepe a temple, a giant food factory, or is it both? Let's put all the pieces together and see what this new picture looks like. The big takeaway here is that it wasn't one or the other, it was both. It was absolutely a place of deep spiritual importance, but it was also a revolutionary experiment in how to organize a society. I mean, think about it. We're seeing people master logistics, mass food production, and workforce management thousands of years before we thought any of that was possible. And they did it all before they even invented farming. And this leaves us with one last, really provocative thought. Just imagine the sheer effort it would take to gather enough wild grain to feed hundreds of people for these giant feasts. It would have been an unbelievable challenge. So could the social pressure, the need to throw bigger and better parties to keep the construction going, have been the very thing that pushed humanity over the edge? To stop just gathering plants and to finally start growing them on purpose? In other words, could it be that the party invented farming?